Remember how Jamie Dimon a few months ago was like, well, we should just seize people's private property for, climate change policy. Remember that? Like, private property doesn't exist to Jamie Dimon if his friends at Goldman Sachs, who basically designed all this like crap that the UN is backing, and green finance and blue finance for Mother Earth and whatever, if those projects decide that they want your property, I guess they'll just turn off your money or whatever and take it. I mean, do you really want to give these guys total control?
Last year, in his annual letter to shareholders, JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon suggested that the United States government and counterparts across the globe, in partnership with climate-focused private organizations, may have to seize citizens' private property to enact climate initiatives while there is still time to stave off climate disasters. Governments, businesses, and non-governmental organizations may need to invoke eminent domain in order to get the adequate investments fast enough for grid, solar, wind, and pipeline initiatives, the billionaire banker and businessman declared in the newsletter. What private property will be up for grabs to save Mother Earth, you may ask? The answer is everything. It started with the farmers, and the next target is your money. According to popular investigative journalist Whitney Webb, the public-private partnership that Dimon and his other banking cabal/World Economic Forum buddies propose is one that will change the course of humanity forever. After FTX's collapse in 2022, investigations revealed an unusual relationship between the cryptocurrency exchange and Farmington State Bank, one of the smallest rural banks in the United States at the time. Yet, FTX's sister company, Alameda Research, poured $11.5 million into the bank, which at the time was more than twice the bank's entire net worth. Other mysterious new accounts also poured millions of dollars into the bank, moving its deposits from the typical $10 million it had maintained for decades to over $80 million in the space of a few months. Shortly before the collapse, Farmington partnered with another relatively unknown heavy hitter with very deep connections with commercial banks in the United States. Fluent Finance has established itself as a trusted developer of central bank CBDCs across the globe, and a particularly controversial stablecoin called US Plus, a federated regulator-forward stablecoin that has entered into numerous partnerships with US-based banks to bridge the gap between the digital world and the banking system. During a recent interview, Whitney warns that the only gap being bridged is the gap between your money and assets and the thieving, controlling hands of the global elites. This plan is to stealthily impose a CBDC on unsuspecting Americans by masking it as a stablecoin. We will now bring you clips from Whitney's interview with TFTC. This is an important video you do not want to miss. Please watch, share, and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks, and enjoy.
Remember, the DOJ holds an insane amount of Bitcoin, and that's probably only going to increase. So like with Binance, a ton of DOJ people have access not just to every transaction on that exchange from now going forward, but also everything in the past. What happens if they flag past transactions and retroactively start seizing wallets? Right. Mm-hmm. They could do that. And I think I've been warning about for a long time, but we've seen it escalate a lot since October 7th, this claim that Bitcoin specifically is being used to finance terrorism. And you're having these pushes to regulate based on that, like under a national security justification. I think that's a recipe for like even more DOJ like seizures, specifically of Bitcoin. And so, why is the DOJ so interested in it's a major arm of the US government. So like the US government more broadly interested in accumulating so much Bitcoin and holding on to it. And also basically creating like national security justifications to literally take anyone's Bitcoin they could possibly want under a variety of like insanely vague metrics. Like I've talked about before, the DOJ is part of this WEF organization that wants to label people who are accused of publishing misinformation online as cyber criminals and cyber terrorism who should have their domains and assets seized. Yeah, I know. I mean, obviously that's like everybody here. The DOJ could eventually it's a really broad net, but why are they setting that system up? You know what I mean? And I think it's important to keep in mind too that, like Gary Gensler of the SEC has made it clear very consistently for a while now that Bitcoin is the only digital currency viewed from the SEC's perspective as a commodity. Everything else is a security to Gary Gensler. So they're going to, that's a pretty unique status. They want to treat it as a commodity as they move everything into the digital currency space. And they have plans to do that and use it for their benefit. And to think they wouldn't do that is like, I think personally really naive. What I think is interesting too, to take this back to FTX too, in light of their team up with Fluent Finance and what Fluent Finance has gone on to do, I really am curious, and I don't really know if there's any way to know now, but all those donations and cozying up to like, Elizabeth Warren and all these other like lawmakers by FTX executives, or Ryan Salome cozying up with the Republicans and stuff. Like, was this to have them favor the stablecoin FTX was going to team up with, which seems to have been Fluent Finance's US Plus, like to favor them as like, the stablecoin issuer of choice for the synthetic CBDC? Pretty interesting possibility there, because a lot of it thought it was just like, crypto regulation to favor, FTX and SBF and stuff. But I think there's a lot of bigger plays that have been going on here for some time. And I think people ignoring these kind of actors, we're doing ourselves a disservice. If you look at the people who created Fluent Finance, the main guy, Bradley Allgood, used to work for like NATO and like military intelligence stuff. And then immediately starts making special economic zones out of a building on this Indian reservation in South Carolina to like replace Delaware as a place where like companies register to like get tax advantages and stuff. And then goes on to team up with this guy, Oliver Gale, who is a failed reggae artist who claims to be the inventor of CBDCs. And the other guy was with him in that first CBDC project in Barbados. So the inventors of CBDC team up with like NATO spook guy to create the SBF stablecoin. That's what was going on before FTX collapsed. And so, yeah, maybe SBF is like out of the picture and whatever.
With FTX now out of the way, Whitney reveals that Fluent Finance has partnered with R3, an organization that describes itself as a leader in the digitization of financial services. R3 began as a consortium of banks and is another major driver of CBDC and stablecoin development globally. Whitney warns that the agenda for a stablecoin/CBDC is still very much in play, which is why the Federal Reserve does not seem too bothered about creating a digital dollar when over 90% of the world's governments are either researching, developing, or have rolled out one already. However, the digital dollar won't be controlled by the Fed, as many expect. It will be controlled by big commercial banks like JP Morgan and their morally bankrupt executives. This again begs the question, do you want these people in control of your money? Let's get back to Whitney's interview, as she reveals more disturbing plans about the elite's grand plan for your money.
R3 started off as a consortium of like some of the biggest banks in the world, and their backers are still the biggest banks in the world. And there's a lot of overlap between how Fluent Finance started and those same banks that back R3, specifically Citibank, HSBC, and Barclays, which if you know the history of any of those banks, not good. And then you have Bradley Allgood, the Fluent Finance guy, like publishing op-eds and Cointelegraph and stuff, being like, CBDCs would be great if they put Wall Street in charge. That's literally what it says. I mean, it's just, they're telling you, but no one's paying attention because they're like, look, these Fed chairs are saying we're not going to do a digital dollar, and that means freedom wins in the good old USA. No, what happens in the USA is that Wall Street steals from everyone and funnels the money to the oligarch class and leaves everyone dirt poor. That's what they're going to do. R3 this year won CBDC Partner of the Year. And from the Central Banking magazine. Like, they're all over the place. They're building this stuff and no one is paying attention to them at all. And they're the big banks of the world. So, people being like, oh, this is all central banks and all Augustine Carsons. Well, like, obviously they're involved to a huge degree, But don't think Wall Street's out there like just going to let the BIS take away their like fractional reserve crack from them. It's not how this works, you know? Well, I think Tether's recent overtures to like, you know, onboarding the Secret Service and the FBI and all of this stuff, freezing all of these wallets on behalf of the US government. This is them trying to curry favor so they don't get totally nuked by regulations and they can be like a de facto synthetic CBDC. And I'm sure USDC is looking to do the same, you know, and that's why I mentioned earlier, like, what were these SBF political donations potentially really about? To be like, who, you know, the people that develop the regulations and enforce them are going to be the kingmakers of like which stable coins are the de facto CBDC or CBDCs, right? And, you know, I think that's something to look for here. I mean, which one is it going to be? I mean, like Mark brought up in talking to the Paxos guy, saying like he didn't think like Tether and USDC was going to make it past regulation. Like, obviously, in my opinion, that's what SBF and Chalopin thought, because, you know, FTX, Deltec, very tied up with Tether for a very long time. Like, very connected. So why are they moving from $1 pegged stable coin to another? Well, the big difference between Tether and US Plus is that US Plus like overemphasizes regulation and CBDC compatibility and trust and reserves and all of this stuff. It's a trusted Tether. It's a trustworthy Tether, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't really say it's actually trustworthy because it's working with the same shady people, right? So, I mean, but they want that public perception to be there. And obviously, I think the gambit was to sell that to regulators and be like, look, this Citigroup backed US Plus stable coin and whatever is compliant and compatible with CBDCs. It can be used for trade, cross-border finance all over the world. And look, R3 in the UAE, and they're going to be the bridge between BRICS and the Western countries and all this stuff. I mean, I'm sure those conversations have been had behind closed doors, you know? And then one thing I think we didn't mention really quick on why the digital dollar is going to be this and not like a direct issue CBDC. Like, if the Fed was going to do a direct issue CBDC, they're really behind. Like, that would take them multiple years to roll out, and they need this stuff a lot sooner.
Yeah.
So as CIA spooks, literal CIA veterans focused on this kind of stuff have said in publication from think tanks like CSIS, is like, we have to use the digital dollars that are already here. We can't make a CBDC.
Whether we recognize it or not, the days of paper currencies are quickly coming to an end. As popular crypto Mark Yusko often says, kids born 5 or 10 years from now will never use paper currency. Cash is becoming obsolete, which means you either buy trusted digital currencies now and personally custody your coins, or be forced to use these proposed stablecoins / CBDCs monstrosities that can and will be turned up at the push of a few buttons. What are your thoughts on Whitney's interview? Do you believe there is much more to all these than we are being told? Please drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.